This is Geek Gab with your host, me, Daddy Warpig. I am back. Geek Gab for Saturday, March 28th, 2026. And today we're going to have special guest Jon Del Arroz, science fiction author, news blogger, YouTuber on the show. And I'm racking my brains for news that I was going to talk about because there was some news I was going to talk about. I just can't recall what it was.
Black Snake.
We had some major sad deaths this last week, which I, of course, mentioned on the Twitter account. There have been just a lot of great actors who have passed away recently, and I'm not going to go through them except to say that for them to rest in peace. The biggest, of course, was Chuck Norris. And I was genuinely, for a couple of days, all of Twitter was consumed with Chuck Norris, 3 days actually, of Chuck Norris memes, which is a lot more than anybody else has ever, I've ever seen. I've never seen anybody get as many Chuck Norris or as many memes or as much discussion. Chuck Norris was a very beloved figure. And even though the Chuck Norris jokes started as a way for people to make fun of his Walker, Texas Ranger persona and the persona from his other action movies, they swiftly grew into a way to show the audience's affection for the actor himself. And he was not the sort to make movies or TV shows that were beloved of critics, but the audience just had so much, they felt such a connection to him. They and he in his personal life seemed like such a genuine and friendly man. I never heard anybody who met him had a mean or nasty thing to say about him. So, of all the deaths that have happened since the last show and the last couple of weeks ago, I just want to say rest in peace, Chuck Norris. You will be missed, and you are not lauded or built up by critics or by the Hollywood press, but all of the people who matter, the audience, your fans, and even people who didn't watch your movies, nevertheless had a great deal of love and a great deal of affection for you. And that just speaks to your character, and that just speaks to the connection they felt for you. So rest in peace, sir. You left behind, if anything, the legacy of who you were is greater than the legacy of the work you left behind. And frankly, there's not a lot of people in Hollywood who can say that. Most Hollywood people, their work is their only legacy. But your character, your warmth, your friendliness, your faith that is a greater legacy than anything else. And I have truly appreciated truly appreciated you being here, truly appreciated you giving of yourself to all of us. I want to Jack Posobiec in a panel discussion, and I don't want to criticize him too much because I didn't watch it, and so I don't want to take this out of context and drop from the top rail onto him and harshly criticize him for something I didn't watch.
I talked to Jack about this yesterday. I'm pretty good friends with him. So I have a lot of insight I can give to you on this also.
But I just want to read something that I posted to Twitter, because whether or not it's responsive to what Jack said, I feel like this is something that needs to be sort of put out there. Joshua Lysek said that nobody is getting saved by reading The Hobbit. So that's what I'm directly responding to. And he said this is a matter of interpretation or defending what Posobiec said. So he says nobody is getting saved by reading The Hobbit. This is my response to that. Heroism always matters. And obviously I'm talking about in stories. One does not need to preach of Christ to teach of Christ. In a society where Christ was everywhere, a small fairy tale built on Christian ideals and Christian virtues was of a piece with the rest of society, and both drew from and added to that strength. No one gets saved by anything save the power of Jesus Christ, the Redeemer, he who is mighty to save. But all things which point to Christ testify of Christ in small or large ways, and none are to be despised nor rejected, for any can serve to cause someone to choose a higher path. You have missed entirely the Spirit of Christ if you do not understand that the widow's mites are as great a contribution as the rich man's bountiful tithes, or the bravery of 4 hobbits is as great as the bravery of great heroes or stalwart warriors. The same goes for small tales not explicitly of Christ as for great sermons from the pulpit. Great or small, all things which point to Christ are of him, and they are all worthy of praise. So that's what I wrote on Twitter. You don't need, as writers or artists, you don't need to belabor an obvious point to invite the Spirit of Christ into a work. Just a few small words can do it. Because as believers in Christ, we are not alone in this world. We are collaborators with Christ in advancing his work. We do not serve alone in the vineyard. God is always mindful of us. Christ is always watching over us. And the Holy Spirit is always with those who are about the work. And it is not our artfulness or our talent which turns hearts to good. It is the Spirit of Christ touching people's hearts through the work that turns them to good. And that can happen because of any number of works and in any number of ways. And I'm not saying a better written work doesn't matter. And I'm not saying a more talented work isn't praiseworthy. I'm saying that when you write something that is dedicated to Christ, whether or not his name is explicitly mentioned, when the values of Christian doctrine of the gospel, when the virtues of Christianity are present in the work, those who read the work can be touched by the Spirit, they can be ennobled, they can be inspired, and they can find the Spirit enticing them to do good, enticing them to change their lives in small or large ways. And any improvement, any movement towards righteousness puts them on the right path. It is not necessary to lecture people. It is not necessary to worry all the time about whether what you are doing mentions doctrine explicitly enough or mentions Christ explicitly enough. Instead of worrying about your work, worry about your life. Pray in the morning and evening, go to church, read the scriptures, and pray about the scriptures. Pray to learn the lessons in your life that you should learn. Pray over the scriptures to receive a witness of their truth. Pray Pray over the Bible and the Book of Mormon to receive a witness of their truth. Be the best person you can be. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be trying as hard as you can where you are today and who you are today. Because God meets us where we are. He does not expect us to be anything else other than who we are today and to be trying to become better. And He will help us become better. And with that as the core of who you are, He will help you. He will help you make works that ennoble and uplift you as an artist and ennoble and uplift other people who engage with your art. Through your heart, as a writer, as you write your words, you will find them turning to serve a higher purpose. People have said that all art is political. This is falsehood. It's a fabrication. All art is spiritual. And it either leads you to hope, to perseverance, to inspiring heroism, to being more resilient to what is going on in your life. Or it leads you in the opposite direction, towards depression, despair, encouraging bad behavior, whatever. All art is spiritual. It either entices to good or it entices to evil, to sinful or wicked behavior, or even thoughts or even despair. So, as a good person, if you are genuinely trying to live your life as best you can, especially if you are engaging in regularly prayer or pray before you start writing, who you are will show through in what you create, and you will find your work becoming uplifted, even if it seems like there are dark elements in your work. Even if it seems like there are horrifying elements in your work. And I'm not saying you can't go too far, because you can, but at the same time, if you are diligent, you will know what too far is. And you will find yourself doing better. And even if it's a work that you decide later, this is my trunk novel, I can't publish it, you will find that it has prepared you to make better work later, and you have become a better person through writing it. One does not need to explicitly talk of Christ to produce a work that invites people into this, that will invite the Spirit of Christ into the reader's lives. So when they say no one is saved by the Hobbit, well, it's true in the sense that angels won't appear and say, yes, this is the holy text that will provide you everything you need to go to heaven. That's why we have the scriptures. But it's false in the sense that it can move people towards nobility, towards wanting to do better. And when that spirit enters their lives, they can start searching for what is better, or can think of those things that they've already been taught about what is nobler, and start to want to read the Bible, or start to want to pray, or start to want to serve their fellow men. It is a gradual process, and one cannot know in what small ways someone else's salvation may be kickstarted. And to despise any given way that the Lord might turn to his use is foolish. God can use so many different things, and he's always willing and always ready to help someone move, to help someone change their life. And even tiny things can serve as that spark. So I think his statement, Joshua Lysek's statement, is misses the point. And I think that we as writers and artists, especially Christian writers and artists, are fearful because we don't recognize whose responsibility it is to do the work. That we have a collaborator on the pointy end, on the sharp end where things really happen. And we don't have to worry so long as we're good people. Even if our work is imperfect, because the entire point of Christianity is that we are imperfect people, and through Christ we are made perfect, that we can pass into heaven. And our work is imperfect when we send it out into the world, but through Christ it is made perfect to touch someone's life, to bring them to the light. All right. I want to thank our guest for coming on the show. I want to introduce Jon Del Arroz and invite him to say hi.
Hi. Yeah. Well, while I agree definitely that all creation and work that's beautiful and true is inherently of God because we're created of God by the Creator, etc. I mean, a lot of the sort of outrage that's being generated at Joshua Lysek and Jack Posobiec is just kind of way extrapolating. And you've got one line from Lysek in this, which is about the Hobbit, and and whether it's directly and overtly being a Christian allegory, which it's not, right? And Tolkien explicitly said he doesn't write allegory, isn't interested in allegory. His influences come through. I'd say actually more in the Lord of the Rings than Hobbit. The Hobbit is very much more leaning towards aping just the Beowulf poem than than anything else. So it's easy to get incensed on this type of stuff and say, okay, these guys are eschewing and poo-pooing the true Christianity or whatever. They're not. I mean, both these guys are very devout Christians and actually caring about advancing Christendom and culture. I'd say a lot more than a lot of their detractors who are actually using this to try to kneecap Christian influencers more than anything, which is what I saw yesterday. And this came from Gary Nerdrotic, the Geeks and Gamers crew, people who are overtly not Christians, who have used their influence sphere to just gain influence for themselves, rather than actually for a cause or anything like that. And you see this in the way they react to everything, that whatever's popular, they're on board with it. Whatever's not popular, they're not on board with it. It's entertainment populism, right? And what's popular is not necessarily good or true. Now, I talked to Jack about this, like I said, um, both in comments online and also privately. And the point of this was never to say The Hobbit is not a good work. He never said that. Lysek never implied that. They both love Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. They just don't believe it is a overtly Christian story. And the overtly is the most important aspect of what they're discussing here. And the context of the discussion was actually something more sinister here, in terms of what Hollywood and the agents of Satan are trying to do to Lord of the Rings, because it is an overtly good work, right? Is they're latching on and glomming onto it and trying to take it and trying to claim it, because that's what they've done historically. I'm actually writing a book on this now, which is how Tolkien was actually originally popularized by hippie, leftist, communist culture in Berkeley. If you guys didn't know that, it actually largely spread out of Berkeley. It was a very small print run when it was done the first time. And the Berkeley hippie community really latched onto it a lot because of the Hobbit pipe weed, which they, unfortunately, Tolkien was a tobacco pipe smoker, of course, but they took that to mean wink, wink, the weed that we love. And they took Lord of the Rings to be a psychedelic, sort of trippy encounter, and spread that the culture on that level. And you saw it. The Beatles referenced it. Led Zeppelin referenced it. All of the hippie rock and roll drug use culture at the time took Tolkien's work and glorified it as their own. Now, Tolkien hated this, and it was not his intention. Tolkien went out there and actually called them deplorable cultists, the people on the west coast of America who were obsessing over this, and did not want anything like that affiliated with them. But that's where the Hollywood culture took this and why they started to care about it to begin with. So this context of this discussion was, why are they pushing and foisting Stephen Colbert, clearly an agent of Satan, onto this property to write a movie on this? And why is this all going on? And what is the mindset of the leftist in which they actually relate to this and love this? That was clipped out to generate outrage from the anti-woke influencer class who wants to actually attack right-wing Christian people a lot of the time. So at this point, they had to defend their statements and what was going on and actually go on about it. And they're right. The Hobbit is not directly going to lead to a conversion of anyone. Now, I would say that by contrast, the Chronicles of Narnia would, because it is very much an allegory to where you actually gain your understanding of what Christ did for his sacrifice for the world. This, not so much. You might see some heroism or whatnot, but heroism, again, which is a virtue and therefore is good and therefore is of God, doesn't necessarily lead to that. I mean, you could say that the Spartans, the 300, were very heroic. They were certainly not Christian, right? So there is a delineation here that's actually nuanced that a lot of people are missing because of the current state of social media and the online discourse of good and bad. And what it comes down to is it's actually the influencers who are anti-Christian within our spaces, who are not Christians, from Geeks and Gamers, from Nerdrotics Crew, etc., who are trying to amplify this in order to just make the Christian influence less, which is interesting here. So, but I agree with you on your points that, again, this is why I claim everything that's good and beautiful as Christian and as conservative, because it's my premise and supposition that everything that's good and beautiful as creation is of our work, and we are in the image of God, therefore it's of God's work. And so I think it's important to claim it. And when I spoke to Posobiec about, we do need to claim it because it is good, it is objectively a beautiful work, and therefore we do need to claim it, he agreed with me. And so there's a lot more to the context in the conversation than taking one line out of something and then, making an implication of a straw man out of that, which is what I'm seeing online with this situation right now. So that's what I'm hoping to dispel with this going on. And this is part of the mission that I'm actually trying to push and everything is we need to build a stronger Christian coalition within culture because it all the movements, Gamergate 2, the Hollywood culture wars around Star Wars got co-opted by people who are not that right wing, who are not that Christian. And then what they do is they try to gatekeep the actual right and the actual Christians out by using these types of situations to generate more controversy off of things. And that's why it's so important to just push forward to not counter signal the actual Christian influencers in our spaces and to just really build something. And that's what we're trying to do here, if that makes sense.
Sure. I hadn't seen anybody else's commentary on it. I just saw like literally his tweet itself, Lysak's tweet itself on Twitter came across my feed. And so I was using that as the occasion to express a point that's been rolling around in my head the last week or two more than
Fair. And not to diminish your point. Your point is beautiful, and I'm on board and I'm ready to crusade with you. So,
especially, I think a lot of the time when people think of works that are Christian, they think of a lot of things that have turned out really bad in terms of their artistic merit, not in terms of their intent, not in terms of what they want to do, but in terms of their artistic merit. And I think the reason why a lot of that happens is because Christian artists are afraid. They're afraid that what they're going to do or what they want to do will anger God, will offend God. And so in the back of their mind, it seems to me, obviously I can't read their minds. It seems to me they're thinking, well, if I can't show this to my pastor, it's evil. Or if I couldn't play this in church, it's evil. And my opinion, my belief, my point of view is God expects us to know what the real world is as Christians. At one point, Jesus Christ says to his followers that he wants us to be wise as serpents, but harmless as doves. And what that means is that followers of Christ should know what men and women really are. You should know when someone is a con man. You should know what alcoholism is and what an alcoholic is likely to do or what a drug addict is likely to do. You should know how money affects people. You should know what propensities happen that it's that some neighborhoods are better than others between, say, Amsterdam and the Ukraine. You just should know that
and I've talked with this about Mark Miller.
I'm not
the comic book writer, right?
I'm not done yet.
Oh,
Just,
sorry about that.
And when you are making art, you should represent the world as it is. Now, if there are truths, you don't have to be unkind or cruel or overly offensive at stating them, but you should represent the world as it is. He doesn't require at your hands that you lie to be nice. And obviously, what kind of book you're making determines the level of detail, but you should be truthful about what the world is. And I think that the reason why a lot of Christian fiction fails is because they're afraid to be truthful, because if they delve into the passion between men and women, I don't mean the physical activity, but just not just the love, but the physical attraction between men and women, they think that that's sexual and that's violating the boundaries of what good Christians can talk about. And I disagree that you're being untruthful and various other things like that. But go ahead and make your point.
I would say that's a misnomer too, that like most Christian arts like that. I would say that at a professional level, you don't really get that from Christian art. And actually, we've covered this. I mean, it's like, honestly, read Jeffro's Appendix N. That's all Christian men writing Christian art. And a lot of it is overt. And that's what the culture was in fantasy for a long, long time. And I think there's been a media psyop to convince us all that Christian art is this like boring, overly sanitized stuff. And I do think at the amateur level, there's a lot of that. I mean, I'm in various Christian author groups, and I see it, right? But at the amateur level, you see a lot of bad work in a lot of forms, right? And so, but when you get to the upper sort of professional levels, I don't really see that personally. I mean, I mentioned I was talking with Mark Miller, the comic book writer, and I interviewed him for Phantom Pulse. And I asked him this directly because if you've ever read his comic book art, it's extremely dark. It's over the top violent, and there's a lot of like shocking things in it and degenerate people in it. And he goes to a level that I would be uncomfortable writing personally. And so I asked him why he would do that as a Catholic, right? And what he told me was, there's a lot of darkness in the world. Have you read how all of the saints ended their lives? It's pretty gruesome because people slaughtered them, right? That's how they became martyrs. And that was a good point. And so I see the merits of writing, I'd say, cleanly and positively. And the reason I try to write that way for the most part is because I see an overabundance of this, like what you would call the gritty out there that is too much in modern culture. I don't think the other way around is a problem right now. I don't think we have enough clean art, to be honest. And so I've been migrating towards a different direction, actually more towards that direction in recent works because of that. Space Fleet Academy is a little different. It's very dark, but again, there's just room for different stories. And it just depends on what you're going for. I guess is what I've come to the conclusion as an artist who's 40 books deep at this point. So,
well, I would say gritty is a dodge. It is like what a magician does with his white gloved hand to get you looking over one way while they work. They call it the dirty. goes on in a different direction. What they mean by gritty is it's supposed to be realistic by showing more violence and sex and stuff. But what they really mean is that it's hopeless, is that it induces despair. And you can take a plot in which you have a hero who goes through a lot of difficulties and bad things, but eventually overcomes. And you can turn up the details of gore and misery until it's just misery porn and call that gritty. Or you can turn down the details of gore and stuff and get something like Frodo's walk through Mordor, through the swamps with the bodies in them, and meeting the orcs and going through the tower and meeting Shelob or whatever. And there is no, in terms of story, in terms of plot, there's no difference between the two. It's just the level of brutality. It's just the level of abusing the audience with the hellish details you're inflicting on them. One, you are showing, hey, these are people, they died in earlier wars, the waters of the swamp snuck in, and now they're lying down there holding their lights. And the other one is, so have you seen Hellraiser and seen all those chains wrap around people and tear their flesh apart? Well, we're going to have lovingly detailed renders of things exactly like that for the next 50 pages. And that just abuses the spirit of the audience. And by spirit, I mean, it abuses your mind. It makes you feel dull. It just hurts, makes you feel sick to your stomach. And after a while, it stops even registering because you're just so tired of it. And they call that misery porn.
That's pretty much why I don't read horror at all, in a nutshell.
Well, not all horror is like that. I'm just saying that gritty is just a misnomer for, at the end of that, you either have the hero succeeds and wins, or the hero comes to this nihilistic end, a Shaggy Dog story, and dies. If the hero wins through, but you've gone through 100 pages of misery porn, that's still not a good book. That's still not a positive book. That's just way too much mind-numbing, soul-numbing detail. You've got to set the level of detail right. And I think if you're a good person, you'll just tend to want to. But if you include some gruesome details, that isn't necessarily evil or wrong. But if you don't want to, that's fine. That's your choice as a writer. I'm not gonna hurl opprobrium at people that don't want to include that. That's perfectly fine. I don't wrong with that.
It's definitely nuanced and it's all contextual, right? And that's a hard thing to express on the internet these days.
Yeah. My main point is that if you're writing, you shouldn't feel guilty about bad things happening in mentioning or implying bad things happening without including details, or even with including some details but not being explicit.
That's what we have in Space Fleet Academy. So I don't know if have you read Vox Day's science papers, where he's pretty much disproved the theory of evolution by natural selection, or heard about it in our circles yet?
I am aware that he has written the 2 books.
it's really interesting, and it's just, it's mathematically obvious once you start to think about it, but nobody's really done the science because obviously there's not funding to do so, right? Because it's scientific consensus that evolution is real, and but at the same time, now that we have AI, he can run mathematical models and actually game these out. And based on the way that genomic drift works, how long would it actually take for a positive mutation to get through a human population of like 8 billion? Well, you're never going to get a new species out of that, is how long it's going to take. So so that pretty much just ends that. And so we took that concept, and that changes when you have a guiding hand and you have somebody willfully attempting to manipulate things. And as we've seen with like different crops and things like that, that they've been grifting different plants together and the like, that you are able to change things in terms of if you're actually guiding it. By accident, it doesn't work like that. And so our whole concept is that humanity going out to the stars at this point understands that there is a genome problem that happens after a while. And actually, the problem that we're facing, and this actually comes down to our population decreases and the like as well, he believes, it's correlated for sure, that because of the negative mutations going on out there, it actually creates an issue where reproduction becomes an issue. And so when you're going out to the stars and you're trying to colonize worlds and keep the human species alive, so we're not just in one star system dependent on the sun and whatnot, and you take that to its extreme level and get your whole situation set up, you're seeding colonies with people in different environments where you actually are sitting there and putting genetic markers intentionally through the colonists there, some of whom are going to die because they are going to get weeded out through the selection process, which is not natural, it's intentional, and some of which are going to, of course, reinforce the genes that actually survive in those environments. So it's a very gruesome sort of deal where, as humanity expands, they are intentionally, basically bioengineering everything across the galaxy. And that leads to a lot of people dying and the like. And to your point, that's a very dark concept, a very interesting concept too. And it's, but at the same time, we're not, we don't have 50 pages of somebody horrifically dying and like because they're breathing in the wrong gas on a colony or something like that. We make it aware that it's happening, and our heroic elements is, well, the goal is to make as many humans survive as possible. Everybody is going to die. It is part of life, right? And so you have to like be able to make the decisions and actually have the confidence to make those decisions to do what's right and actually make enough as many people survive as possible. And that is what the academy is training the cadets to do, to deal with, and to manage. So it's a pretty interesting psychological experiment and pretty interesting scientific sort of hard science that we're building into this universe at the same time. So it's going to get interesting as we're building it up. We're setting this for a multi-book series to where it just doesn't end right away, because that's our other thing with writing. This will be interesting. You might be interested in this. Modern Hollywood and modern writers, they tend to, the power creep is ridiculous, right? We must save New York. We must save America. We must save the universe. We must save the multiverse, right? And it gets boring after a while, right? Because everybody's saving the entire universe every single book. Well, you got a 1-book series that's interesting after that. And by the time you're into book 4 or 5, it's not interesting anymore. So we're intentionally trying to keep what they're doing low so that we can actually build it up over time and not just prematurely end things as well. So yeah, that's our concept that we're doing right now. What do you think about it?
Well, science fiction is really starved for new concepts or imaginative applications of old concepts. So Anything along those lines, I would applaud. Um, because it seems to me like there is a author who keeps getting published whose works are basically fanfic of old ideas with a bunch of really, I haven't read his book, so I don't want to say too much, but it sounds like boring and bizarre sex scenes added. And I just don't see the point. If you're just retreading older stuff and not adding anything except, modern sexual mores, what's the point? So
that stuff sells like hotcakes. Is really the main problem with our book industry right now. I don't know if you saw like a few months ago, this lady made a fan fiction of Draco Malfoy and Hermione that goes where you think it does. And then they just changed the names of it and republished it, so it's not fanfic. And she's already got a multi-million-dollar movie deal because of it. It's sickening, the incentive to do exactly that.
So I taking new ideas or putting out new ideas is something I always applaud, because it means people are putting work and putting thought into what they do.
We definitely try to do that, because, and it's the point at this point. Like, it's like, okay, what can we say about this that's interesting and different? Otherwise, what's the point in doing it, right? And that's kind of how I think both Vox and I look at things at this point.
Simon Hawkwood says there are actually 3 Hermione Draco Malfoy /fic books published last year. I was aware of 2 of them.
Oh, geez, 3. This all started because of Twilight. You know this, right?
Oh man.
Because 50 Shades of Grey was Twilight fan fiction, and they filed the serial numbers off. They removed the vampire and then just made it a gross, degenerate film. And that's what started all of this. And because that made so much money and got so much accolades, all these women stopped having shame about this. And that's what snowballed into the romanticist slop genre that we have today. That's the history of it.
We are in dire need of, and it's going to have to come from the indie side, because as I've mentioned on the show and on Twitter many times, mainstream publishing is not publishing any new straight white male authors. For the last 12 years, they have decided editors, agents, publishers are not allowing any new straight white male authors in. James Joyce posted about this. She was aghast. She said, but there are some straight white male authors who interrogate their own privilege that should be allowed to be published. Everybody else can, get lost. So this is real. So it's going to have to come from indie, but because they're only publishing female authors primarily and other types of authors, all of the traditionally male genres have been swamped, and for the most part, except for those people who were grandfathered in, they have ceased to exist or been taken over and changed into something else. Epic fantasy has become romantasy. Urban fantasy has become paranormal romance, and so on and so forth. And you can say, well, what about Jim Butcher? And my response is, new. Did you miss new? There are no more new straight white male urban fantasy authors. People who are already in existence will continue their publishing, but there are no more new of them.
Yeah, they saw what he did and co-opted it, and that was it.
So what we need is, and it has to come from indie because it won't come from big publishers, new authors who get to be who are so compelling enough that they get to be big successes to reinvigorate the action adventure side of those genres. So we have stuff that is appealing to men. What people don't realize, if I could say this brutally, and this angers women, it angers feminists, so I'm going to try to say it kindly, because all truths, if they're true, should be said kindly. Action adventure stories primarily, not solely, primarily appeal to boys. And when I say boys, I mean specifically boys, adolescent males. And a lot of adults carry that over, but by the time they're adults, most adult men who are still readers have moved on to thicker books or books with more technical explanations, things like that. They're not into the straight action adventure as much as they were. But action adventure, but a lot of them still are. Action adventure typically appeals to boys and men. It does not appeal as much to women. I'm not saying that to insult women. I'm not saying that to demean women. I'm just saying that's demographic facts. And so you see that proven because when women became the predominant new authors, action adventure genres became romance genres. They became romantasy and, paranormal romance and all of these other genres we're seeing. So it's been, the experiment has been carried out. We got rid of the men, and the action adventure went away. We proved it. It is now supported by absolutely incontrovertible evidence. You cannot deny this anymore. So in order to get the action adventure back, we need men writing action adventure books. And I'm not, every time I say this, people jump in and say, well, what about me? Well, what about me? Well, I understand there are lots of indie people, indie authors writing these, and I know lots of them. Possibly I know most of them. I've been talking with them for 10 years on this show. So what we need is author or authors big enough, despite coming from indie, that they swamp these that they get males, they get men and boys reading again. They get them back because men have stopped reading because there aren't any books they're aware of that are being published for them. And here's the thing: they started publishing, started writing books with female protagonists because they were told all the readers are women and you have to write female protagonists so women will read your books. Here's the secret, guys, that nobody told you, but which I know and I'm going to tell you. If you write books that are popular enough that you get a ton of men reading your books, the women readers will come. The women follow the men.
And that's that all comes down to marketing. I'm sorry about this. I've got a 1.5-year-old. The marketing is where a lot of people fall. And actually, a lot of the authors in our spaces poo-poo marketing, fight the correct ways to market, and then of course fight people like myself for understanding marketing and getting it done. But if you don't learn marketing at this point, you're dead on the vine. There are on Amazon in 2025, there were 4 million books produced. That's up by 3 million from 2024. It's going to get worse every single year because there's a lot of there's a lot of easy ways to, you can generate a book in 30 minutes now. And people don't care whether it's generated or not as much as people shout about it all the time. They don't. And this is happening all over. And not to say, some of them, if you generate something in 30 minutes, by the way, you're not going to come out with quality. But it is easier to generate books than ever before. You can do it. And if you are very tactful with, of course, the AI tool, most people know I'm very positive about that. And you work with it, and you are very careful about guiding it step by step, and making sure you have your story and a good idea, you will come out with good work as well. But with that, and that many books in the market, and the way that social media algorithms are now, there's no way to just like put out your book there and go like, my book's good, people are going to buy it. It doesn't exist anymore. I know plenty of good authors who never sell 100 copies of their books. And if you don't learn to market, you're dead in the water. And so that's it. And it's getting worse. It's getting harder. And again, the algorithms are against us now. If you post an outside link onto Twitter, it's dead. If you talk about just your book and stuff like that on Twitter, even if, it's dead. And it's because the algorithms are not even showing things to your followers anymore. Same thing, YouTube, it's gone exactly the same direction. And that's a little bit of a black pill, but you also just have to understand how to utilize that to grow your personal following to a point where it doesn't matter. And if you do that, you will win. And I've personally seen the results of that the last 6 months. It's been crazy. My book sales are, even though you see me rarely ever talk about my books on Twitter or whatever, you scroll through my feed. I've got a couple when I got a new release, right? But I don't post the links very often, if ever. My books continually sell better than ever before because people see that I say author on my page. They look me up on Amazon, and it works. And it's a percentages game of, you reach 1 million people, you might sell 1,000. And that's kind of the way it works now. So there is hope. It's just harder than ever before. And you have to really grind the game harder than ever before if you want to get it out there, and if you want to get past everything that's out there, because it's flooded on every single level. So hopefully that helps some folk.
By the way, there is a link to the first book in the Space Fleet Academy series in the comments of the show. It'll take you to Amazon where you can purchase the book.
Did you see how this came about, DW? It's the funniest story ever.
No, you were gonna talk.
Are you familiar with Robert Picardo, the Emergency Medical Holographic Program?
Yes.
So he started following me on X and then attacking me whenever I would say anything negative about Starfleet Academy.
Okay.
And he'd come on my feed and just like, tell me I don't have an open mind and whatever. And I'm just like, I don't need to have an open mind for gay Klingons, right? I don't want that. That's not a value. And eventually it got to a point where he said, he actually came in one of my threads and said, you know what, if you think it's so bad, if you think it's so easy, why don't you make one yourself? And I said, okay. And that's why this exists.
Well, touche.
So thank you, Robert Picardo. I dedicated the first book to him because honestly, I mean, this has sold thousands. It's made it's been my biggest release ever. This is when Nick Cole came out with Galaxy's Edge and like nailed the algorithm properly at the right time and all that. Space Fleet Academy's done that for Vox Day and it's gone and it's worked. So thank you guys for reading and actually making this work. Without you guys, it doesn't work. And I'm really funny how it came about. We decided not to go very Star Trek-y with it and not to ape Star Trek, not to make a parody out of it. And like, we've already talked about the hard science behind it. That's really dark and different. And just kind of use the title to as marketing. And I do think that's important. The fact that it's close to Starfleet Academy as a title when people are searching it is why the marketing went as well. So marketing is on every level, and always remember that is the lesson there.
And of course, this last week, we got the news that Starfleet Academy has been canceled. So
please sign the petition to save it. Thank you.
It did not. I mean, the big headlines were it didn't break into the top 10 of any streaming show on any site, but the bigger headline that nobody covered was that it didn't break into the top 10 on Paramount's own streaming service.
It's so funny.
I mean, I was looking at Paramount's streaming service, and it was getting beat by reruns of Everybody Loves Raymond.
For good reason.
Everybody Loves Raymond was beating, and that's like a 30-year-old TV show.
Yeah, but it's better.
I just apparently my comment was on Twitter, everybody does love Raymond. They love it more than Starfleet Academy.
Yeah, I'm horrified though, because like I want Starfleet Academy to go on forever so that I continue to have content to mock. Because it's a gold mine. I mean, you can't make up what they're doing. It is such the lowest level of possible parody of Star Trek that I could have never envisioned it even as a joke mocking it, what they're doing. It's wild.
The one thing that irked me, and it shouldn't irk me because it's happened so many times, I should be numb to it, is the actress saying, well, the real reason why our show failed is because of the moral failings of the American people who just aren't ready to accept the truths of a show. I'm like, no, your show didn't fail because of the moral failure of American people who aren't ready to accept blah, blah, blah. Your show failed because it sucked. It sucked in all the concepts for the characters and sucked in the concepts for the show. Your show sucked in the execution because the scripts were bad and the characters were bad. And I'm not saying all the actors on the show were bad actors, but the characters were terrible, the scripts were terrible, and there wasn't there you can't act through, with very rare exceptions, you can't act through absolutely terrible characters.
Paul Giamatti and Holly Hunter are top tier actors. I mean,
Yeah.
it's insane, and it's sad that they're associated with this.
And I watched like 6 episodes of the show.
God bless you.
Paul Giamatti does the best he can with the worst garbage. And he is just acting his heart out with absolute crap. And you're like, man, I love Paul Giamatti.
You know, it made the show better for me when I realized his character was actually the good guy, and that I should be rooting for him. And then it all made sense, right?
He's always great, no matter what he's in. He elevates everything, and he was like the single bright spot in the show. But the rest of the show is just such. They had ideas taken in isolation, which you could say, this is not an entirely bad idea if you did it completely differently. If other writers were doing it, this might have been a good idea. But yeah, it
was painful. So yeah. Cool. Well, on that, my son's got a tournament here, so I need to jet. So thank you for having me on, DW. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. It's about time for us to go anyways. This is about to closing time. So do you have any last words?
Black Snape.
Okay.
That's it.
No, I don't have anything else to say. Rest in peace, Chuck Norris.
Yes.
And we'll think this has been Geek Gab for Saturday, March 28th, 2026. I want to thank Mr. Del Arroz for coming on the show. And we want to remind you that we are here on youtube.com/geekgab. Once again, youtube.com/geekgab. We are here just about every week, 12 noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in live. I want to thank everyone for tuning in later. We are signing off for today, but don't you worry, don't you fret. We will be back.